The rain hammered against the glass of the law office, drowning out the ticking clock. My phone vibrated on the mahogany desk for the 48th time this week. It was my son. Last night, he treated me like a stranger and kicked me out of his wedding. Today, he wanted the deed to my land. I stared at the legal document in front of me, my pen hovering over the signature line. I was not signing this out of spite. My name is Marjorie Ann Caldwell, and at 56 years old, I was sitting in a leather chair that felt too big for me, inside a small law office in Millstone Ridge. The room smelled of old paper, damp wool, and the bitter dregs of coffee that had been sitting in the pot since morning. Outside, the grey sky had opened up, and the rain was hammering against the glass pane with a relentless rhythm. It sounded like 1,000 tiny fingers tapping, demanding to be let in, matching the frantic beating of my own heart. On the mahogany desk, my phone vibrated again. It buzzed against the wood like a trapped insect. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was. The name Ethan had flashed there 48 times in the last 7 days. My son, the boy I had nursed through pneumonia, the teenager I had taught to drive on the dirt roads of our property, the man who was now calling me as if the world were ending. I did not reach for the phone. My hand was clenched tight around a heavy fountain pen, my knuckles white as bone. June Harkness, my lawyer, sat across from me. She was a sharp woman with silver hair cut in a severe bob, and she did not look at the phone. She looked only at me. "Marjorie," June said softly, her voice cutting through the sound of the rain. "Are you sure I need you to be absolutely certain? Once you sign this, there is no turning back. You understand that?" "Right." I looked past her, toward the window. The parking lot outside was a blur of wet asphalt and grey puddles. It looked cold. It looked lonely. It looked exactly how I felt 3 weeks ago when I was standing in the parking lot of a wedding venue, shivering in a dress that was too thin for the ocean breeze. "I am not doing this out of hate," I whispered, though I was not sure if I was speaking to June or to myself. "I am signing because the truth finally showed its face." My mind drifted back, pulling me away from the warm office to the long drive I had made 3 weeks prior. It was a 5-hour drive from the rolling hills of Alden County to the coastal city of Bayhaven. I remembered the nervous energy that had coursed through me as I gripped the steering wheel of my old sedan. I had spent months preparing for that day. I had bought a deep blue dress, the color of the midnight sky. It was elegant, far more expensive than anything I usually wore. I had put it on a credit card and was paying it off in 3 installments of $70. I remembered how the fabric felt cool against my skin, how I had felt beautiful for the first time in years. But I also remembered the shoes. They were stiff and narrow, and by the time I had walked from the parking lot to the venue entrance, my heels were already blistered and bleeding. But the pain had not mattered. All that mattered was the thick, cream-coloured envelope tucked safely inside my handbag. It felt heavy, heavier than just paper. It contained $9,500. That was every cent I had managed to scrape together from working extra night shifts for 2 years. It was not just money. It was my blessing. It was my way of telling Ethan that even though I was alone, even though his father was gone, I could still provide for him. Thomas came into my mind then, as he often did when I was about to make a hard decision. I could almost hear his voice, rough and warm, echoing from the past. "Land is memory, Marge. Don't let anyone bury it with a bulldozer. Once it's gone, it's just dirt." He had said that to me, looking out over our 38 acres, his hand resting on my shoulder. He knew the value of what we had. He knew that some things were not meant to be sold, traded, or leveraged for a quick profit. The vibration of the phone stopped, leaving a sudden, ringing silence in the office. I looked down at the document June had placed in front of me. The legal jargon was dense, but the meaning was clear. It was a shield. It was a weapon. It was the only answer left to give. I understand. I said to June. I lowered the pen. The metal tip touched the paper, right on the signature line. The black ink bled slightly into the fibre of the page, making a tiny, irreversible dot. I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs with the scent of rain and old decisions. I held the pen there, suspended for a single heartbeat, poised on the edge of changing everything. The reception hall in Bayhaven was a sensory overload of golden light and noise. Chandeliers dripping with crystals hung from the ceiling, casting shattered rainbows across the white tablecloths. A bass-heavy pop song was thumping against the walls, vibrating through the floorboards and up into the soles of my uncomfortable shoes. I stood near the dessert table, clutching my beaded handbag against my ribs like a shield. I focused on maintaining a polite, steady smile, the kind that made my cheeks ache. I was trying to look like I belonged, like I was just another happy guest and not a woman wearing a dress she could barely afford, waiting for her son to acknowledge her. Then I saw Ethan. He was weaving through the crowd, but he was not smiling. He was not coming to hug me or introduce me to his new in-laws. He walked with a stiff, military precision, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere above my left shoulder. He stopped 3 feet away from me, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne, a scent I did not recognize. He refused to meet my eyes. "Mom," he said, his voice flat and low. "Mom, you need to leave." I felt the blood drain from my face. The room suddenly felt very cold, despite the humidity of the crowded hall. I blinked, sure I had misheard him. "Ethan," I stammered, my voice trembling. What is happening?" The speeches have not even started. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, looking down at his polished black shoes. "Sloane is uncomfortable," he said, dropping the words like stones. "She says your presence it is too controlling. You are creating pressure just by being here. You are stressing her out on her big day." The accusation hit me like a physical slap. Controlling. I had been in the room for 20 minutes. I had not spoken 10 words to the bride. I had stood by the cake, invisible and silent. Desperation rose in my chest. I reached for the clasp of my bag. "Ethan, please," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just want to give you your gift. I worked so hard to get this for you. Just give me 1 minute to wish you happiness and hand you the envelope. And then I will go sit in the back. I won't say a word." He took a step closer, invading my personal space, his jaw tight. "No," he hissed. "Don't make a scene. Just go. Please. Right now." I looked past him toward the head table. Sloane was sitting there, enshrined in white lace. She was holding a champagne flute, laughing at something a bridesmaid whispered. Then, her eyes flicked toward me. She didn't look stressed. She didn't look anxious. She smiled, a small, delicate curving of her lips that did not reach her eyes. It was a look of absolute victory. She had snapped her fingers, and my son had jumped. I set my glass of water down on the table with a soft clink. I did not scream. I did not beg. I felt the gaze of the room turning toward us. Or maybe it was just my paranoia. But every glance felt like a judgment. I turned around and began to walk. The distance to the double doors felt like miles. I navigated through the sea of strangers, keeping my head high, refusing to let a single tear fall until I was out of sight. Outside, the late afternoon sun was blinding. The heat radiating off the asphalt in the parking lot was oppressive. I made it to my car, my hands shaking so badly I dropped my keys. Before I started the engine, I opened my bag just to reassure myself. The envelope was there. It was thick and heavy. $9,500. It represented 2 years of working extra shifts at the Northbridge Medical Review Board, reading dense medical files until my eyes burned. It was my sacrifice, wrapped in cream paper. I drove the 5 hours back to Millstone Ridge in silence. I turned off the radio. I could not bear music. There was only the hum of the tires on the highway and the sound of my own ragged breathing. As the miles stretched out, the shock began to fade, replaced by a cold, hard realization. He didn't just kick me out of a party, I whispered to the empty car. He kicked me out of the right to be his mother. I pulled into my driveway well past midnight. My house looked dark and empty, exhausted. I carried my bag into the kitchen and turned on the small light over the stove. I wanted to put the money back in the fireproof box in my closet. I unclasped the bag and reached inside. My fingers brushed against a lipstick tube, a pack of tissues, my car keys. I frowned and pulled the bag open wider, dumping the contents onto the counter. Items scattered across the formica. But the heavy cream envelope was gone. I checked the side pockets. I checked the lining. I shook the bag upside down. Nothing. My stomach dropped. I remembered a moment in the crowd, a bump against my shoulder as I was being ushered out, a flurry of movement near the exit. Someone had not just thrown me out. Someone had robbed me on my way out the door. The morning sun did not bring clarity. It brought the harsh reality of bills on the kitchen counter and the empty space in my purse where my savings used to be. The electric bill was due. Property taxes were creeping up. And I was staring at a checking account that felt terrifyingly light. I was still making coffee, my hands trembling slightly. When the phone rang, it was Ethan. I hesitated, then answered. I expected an apology. I expected shame. Instead, his voice came through the speaker, bright and breezy, as if he were asking to borrow a ladder for a weekend project. Hey, Mum, listen. I need you to send over the property papers for Cedar Hollow, the deed and the survey maps. Do you have them handy? I gripped the edge of the counter. The air left my lungs. Cedar Hollow was not just a property. It was 38 acres of forest and meadow in Millstone Ridge. It was the place where my grandfather built the barn by hand. It was the exact spot under the old oak tree where Thomas had gone down on one knee and asked me to marry him. It was the only home Ethan had ever known. The papers, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ethan, what are you talking about? The plan. Mom, he said, his tone shifting into a practiced sales pitch. We are going to subdivide. Sloane's uncle has looked at the zoning. We can fit 8 luxury units on the back lot if we clear the woods. It is a quick turnaround. Fast investment. Uncle Gordon is handling all the permits, so you don't have to worry about a thing. 8 units? He wanted to turn the woods where he used to build forts into a row of identical townhouses. He spoke about bulldozing our history as if he were discussing changing a light bulb. But Where would I live? I asked. Oh, we have thought about that, he said quickly, too quickly. There is this great senior living community near Bayhaven. It is really vibrant. Honestly, Mom, living alone out there on all that land, it is not practical anymore. This is safer for you. Practical. The word felt like a knife wrapped in velvet. He was evicting me from my life for my own safety. Ethan, I said, cutting through his pitch. Last night, you threw me out. You kicked me out of your wedding. There was a pause on the line, a heavy, suffocating silence. Look, Mom. He sighed, the cheerfulness dropping away to reveal annoyance. I am sorry you felt embarrassed, but let's not dwell on the past. Okay, we need to focus on the future. Sorry you felt embarrassed? Not sorry he did it. Just sorry I had feelings about it. Before I could respond, I heard a voice in the background. It was faint, but unmistakable. It was Sloane, and her voice was sharp, cutting through the air like a pair of shears. Ask her if she signed yet. We don't have all day. My blood ran cold. Ethan cleared his throat loudly, trying to cover the sound. Anyway, I am texting you the address for the courier, he said, his voice tight with urgency. I have a meeting with the investors on Thursday. Do not make me look bad. Mum, don't ruin my future just because you are being sentimental. The line went dead. I walked out the back door into the garden. The air smelled of damp earth and pine needles. I walked to the row of maple trees Thomas had planted 20 years ago. I ran my hand over the rough bark. Land is memory. I had promised him I would keep it safe. But now, my own son was coming for it, with a demolition crew. I went back inside and opened my laptop. My fingers numb. I needed to check my bank balance again, to see if the missing cash had somehow miraculously reappeared. It hadn't. But there was a new email in my inbox from the wedding registry platform. The subject line read, "Thank you for your generous contribution." I frowned and clicked it open. It was a receipt for a cash donation of $9,500 made to the Ethan and Sloane Honeymoon Fund. Attached was a scanned image of a gift form. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. There, at the bottom of the form, was a signature. It was shaky, but it looped the M and crossed the T exactly the way I did. It was my name, but I had never signed it. Someone had taken the cash from my bag, deposited it into their own fund, and forged my signature to make it look like a voluntary gift. They stole my savings, and now they were using a fake paper trail to thank me for it. I drove straight to the Northbridge Medical Review Board office. The building was quiet, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee. I needed proof. I needed to hold the physical evidence that the money in that envelope belonged to me, earned hour by exhausting hour, and was not some generous donation I had forgotten making. I asked the payroll administrator for a printed copy of my shift logs for the last 2 years. She handed me a thick stack of paper. I scanned the columns. There were hundreds of entries marked overtime and night shift. Every single dollar of that $9,500 had been paid for with my sleep and my health. This was not a gift from a wealthy mother. It was blood money, and they had taken it. I sat in my car in the parking lot and called the bank. My hands were shaking so hard I had to rest the phone on my knee to dial. I need to query a transaction. I told the representative, a withdrawal of $9,500 made yesterday. The voice on the other end was calm, detached. Yes, Mrs. Caldwell. That withdrawal was made at a branch in Bayhaven at 5:40 in the afternoon. It was authorized using the supplementary debit card issued to an Ethan Caldwell. I closed my eyes. 5:40. That was exactly 40 minutes after Ethan had told me to leave the wedding. He had kicked me out, and while I was driving home crying on the highway, he or his wife had walked into a bank with the card I had given him 10 years ago for college textbooks. He had kept it all this time. And the representative continued. We have processed the change of address form you mailed in earlier this week. My eyes snapped open. Excuse me, I asked, my voice rising. What change of address? To the apartment complex on Harbour View Drive in Bayhaven, she replied. All future statements and legal notices regarding the mortgage and the accounts will be sent there. They were not just stealing the land. They were blinding me. They were redirecting my mail so that when the foreclosure notices or the transfer deeds came through, I would never see them. I would be sitting in my house, oblivious, until the sheriff arrived to evict me. Cancel it, I said, my voice turning to ice. Cancel it all, and freeze that card. I drove to the post office next. I did not run. I walked with a steady, furious purpose. I filled out a form requiring that any future change of address for my residence must be verified in person with a photo ID. I was locking the doors to my life, one by one. When I pulled into my driveway at Cedar Hollow, my neighbour, Darlene, was waiting by the fence. She was 70 years old and saw everything. Marjorie, she called out, leaning over the rails. I meant to tell you. I saw people here the night before the wedding. I thought it was you, but they had fancy equipment. Who I asked, walking over to her. A man and a woman, Darlene said. They were down by the old barn. The man had one of those laser tripods surveyors use. He was measuring the distance to the creek. I thanked her and rushed inside. I had installed a security camera on the eaves of the barn years ago to watch for coyotes. I hadn't checked it in months. I pulled up the app on my tablet and scrolled back to the date before the wedding. There they were. The video was grainy, but the faces were clear enough. Sloane was walking through the tall grass in high heels, pointing at the tree line. Next to her was an older man with silver hair and an expensive suit. Gordon Whitaker, her father. They were not visiting. They were appraising. Gordon was holding a tablet, nodding as he looked at my land. I turned the volume up to the maximum. The microphone picked up the rustle of wind and then, clearly, Gordon's voice. Don't worry about the zoning, Gordon said on the recording. She is old. We just need the paper. Once she signs, it is done. We can bulldoze this shack within a month. I watched the screen. I watched my daughter-in-law nod in agreement as she looked at the home where I had raised her husband. She won't fight, Sloane said, her voice tinny through the speakers. She is too soft. I paused the video. I sat there in the silence of my kitchen, staring at the frozen image of the people who thought I was nothing but a signature on a page. The tears that had been threatening to fall all morning suddenly evaporated. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. I reached for a notepad and a pen. I wrote down bank. I wrote down post office. Then I wrote down June Harkness. And then, at the bottom of the list, I wrote one more thing. It was not a defensive move. It was a trap. You think I am soft? I whispered to the frozen image of Sloane. Fine. I will show you exactly how hard I can be. I walked into June Harkness's office with the posture of a soldier reporting for duty. I did not bring tissues. I brought evidence. I laid the items onto her oak desk one by one. The tablet containing the video of Gordon and Sloane measuring my land, the bank statement showing the unauthorized withdrawal, the printed shift logs from my job, and finally, the original deed to Cedar Hollow. June watched the video in silence. Her face was grim, illuminated by the blue light of the screen. She watched Sloane point at my home, and she listened to Gordon Whitaker call me old and irrelevant. When the clip ended, she took off her glasses and looked at me. "Marjorie," June said, her voice serious and low, "this is not just a family dispute. They are not just pressuring you. They are building a case. If you refuse to sign, they are going to claim you are mentally unfit. They will try to use power of attorney or guardianship laws to force the sale." I sat back in the chair. I felt a cold knot in my stomach, but my hands were steady. "I know," I said. "That is why I brought this." I reached into my bag and pulled out a yellowed envelope. It smelled of tobacco and old paper. It was the file Thomas had kept in his safe. Thomas wrote a codicil to his will years ago, I explained. He wanted to put a conservation easement on the land. He wanted to make sure it could never be subdivided. I never filed it because I thought it would be an insult to Ethan. I thought my son would love this place as much as we did. June opened the file and scanned the document. She nodded slowly. "We can use this," she said, "but we need to go further. I propose we move the deed into an irrevocable land trust immediately. We will include a specific clause against elder abuse and undue influence. Once the land is in the trust, you do not technically own it anymore. You are the beneficiary, but you cannot sell it, and neither can anyone who tries to manipulate you." "Do it," I said without hesitation. "But there is one more thing," June added, tapping her pen on the desk. "If they file for guardianship, they will claim you are confused. They will say you don't understand what you are signing. I am one step ahead of you," I said. "I want an independent medical evaluation. Today, I want a doctor to certify that I am of sound mind, fully capable of making legal decisions. When they try to say I am senile, I want to be able to throw a medical affidavit in their faces." June smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression. "Smart. Very smart. I will call Dr. Evans right now. And Marjorie. I will draft a document designating me as the sole point of contact for all legal matters. From this moment on, if they want to talk to you, they have to go through me." She began to type furiously. The sound was like a machine gun. "One warning," June said, stopping for a moment to look me in the eye. "Once you sign this land into the trust, Ethan will never get it. He will have no paper to demand. It is a permanent door you are closing." "He closed the door when he kicked me out of his wedding," I replied. "I am just locking it." I leaned forward. "But before we file the papers tomorrow morning, I need something else. I need him to say it. I want a recorded call. A legal recording where he admits what he is doing." June nodded. "We can do that. Connecticut is a one-party consent state for recording if we are careful. But since he is in New York, we will do it right here in the office with full disclosure on my end as a witness. We will let him think he has won." June turned back to her computer to pull up the county property records to prepare the transfer. Suddenly, she stopped typing, her eyebrows pulled together. "Marjorie," she said, her voice dropping. "Come look at this." I walked around the desk. On the screen was the digital registry for Alden County. There was a credit inquiry on your property title filed this morning, June said, pointing at a name on the screen. Someone was checking to see if there were any existing mortgages or liens, likely to calculate the buyout equity. I looked at the name of the requester. It was not a bank. It was not a real estate agency. The name on the screen was Gordon Whitaker. He is not just an investor, I whispered, staring at the name of the man who had invaded my property. He is treating my home like he already owns it. June placed a small digital recorder in the center of the desk. The red light blinked once and then turned into a steady, unblinking eye. I stared at it for a moment, gathering the pieces of my resolve. I was not calling my son to catch up. I was calling to let him walk into a trap he had built for himself. I dialed his number and pressed the speakerphone button. June sat silently beside me, her pen hovering over a legal pad, ready to document every syllable. Ethan picked up on the second ring. "Mom," he asked. His tone was sharp, impatient. "Did you get the courier package?" I took a breath and let my shoulders slump, intentionally making my voice sound thinner, older than I actually felt. "Ethan," I said, letting a tremor slide into the words. I am just so tired. I think maybe you are right. Maybe I am getting too old to manage it all alone, but I want to hear the plan again. I need to be sure." The change in his voice was instantaneous. The irritation vanished, replaced by a manic, hungry excitement. "Of course. Mom, look, it is simple. We have the investors lined up. We have the preliminary contracts ready. It is a gold mine. Uncle Gordon says the market is peaking right now. We just need to move fast." He paused, and I could hear the rustle of papers in the background. "If you sign by Thursday," he continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "we will transfer the rest of the wedding money into an account for you, to get you started at the senior center." I looked at June. Her eyes narrowed. This was the opening. "What wedding money?" I asked, innocently. "The $9,500, Ethan said, as if it were obvious. "Sloan said you gave it to us as a down payment on the gift. We just need the rest of the assets to clear, so we can pay you back the difference later." My hand clenched into a fist on the armrest. He admitted it. He admitted knowing the exact amount of the theft. June leaned forward, her voice calm and authoritative, cutting into the conversation like a scalpel. "And who is currently in possession of the debit card used to access those funds?" The line went dead silent. It was a thick, suffocating silence that lasted for fully 2 seconds. Ethan had not expected another voice. He had not expected a witness. "Who is that?" Ethan stammered. "Mom, who is there with you?" Before I could answer, there was a scuffling sound, and then Sloane's voice pierced the air, dripping with artificial sweetness but underlined with steel. "Give me the phone." "Ethan," she snapped. Then her voice softened for me. "Aunt Marjorie, please. Let's be reasonable. Think about Ethan's future. Why are you being so difficult? What good does that land do you anyway? It is just dirt." I stared at the recorder. They did not care about me. They did not care about my history. "I have a question." "Sloane," I said, keeping my voice steady. "If I sign the papers, do you promise to give me back my mailing address? Will you return my bank card?" I waited. It was a simple question. A yes or no would suffice, but June and I both knew that the answer would reveal the nature of their control. "That is not relevant right now," Sloane said dismissively. "We are trying to help you downsizing." The mail and the bank are just administrative details. We are handling it for you because you are clearly overwhelmed." June scribbled furiously on her pad, "Admission of control. Refusal to return stolen property." "We are not overwhelmed," I said softly. "Mum, listen to me." Ethan interrupted, his voice rising in panic. "You don't understand how far this has gone. Uncle Gordon has already spoken to the contact at the land registry office. They are waiting for the deed. If you don't sign, you are going to make us look like fools. You are going to ruin everything I have worked for." June's head snapped up. She circled the note on her pad 3 times. Uncle Gordon, land registry contact. They had not just planned to persuade me, they had already greased the wheels inside the system to process a transfer I had not yet agreed to. They were bypassing the law. I looked at June. She gave me a single, sharp nod. "We had enough. I understand perfectly." "Ethan," I said, "I will give you my answer tomorrow morning." I reached out and severed the connection before they could say another word. The red light on the recorder flickered and went out. June sat back in her chair and let out a long breath. "Well," she said, tapping the notepad. "He just admitted to financial theft, and he implicated his father-in-law in a conspiracy to manipulate public records. Marjorie, they didn't just hand us a smoking gun. They handed us the bullets." The silence of my home was replaced by the digital noise of a small town turning against me. Ethan and Sloane had realized that I was not going to sign quietly, so they decided to burn my reputation to the ground before they took the land. It started with text messages from family members I had not spoken to in years. Then came the concerned posts on social media, visible through the shared accounts of neighbors. They were painting a portrait of a woman who was confused, stubborn, and being manipulated by a predatory lawyer. My phone rang just past noon. It was my cousin Sarah, a woman who had not called me since Thomas's funeral. "Marjorie," she said, her voice dripping with a condescending sweetness that set my teeth on edge. "I just got off the phone with Ethan. He is so worried about you. He says you are, well, that you are not yourself. Why are you trying to ruin that boy's future?" I gripped the phone, staring out the kitchen window at the empty bird feeder. "Ruin his future?" I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Sarah, he kicked me out of his wedding. He stole money from me." "Oh, Marjorie." She sighed, as if speaking to a toddler having a tantrum. "Ethan said you would say things like that. He said you are getting paranoid. Just sign the papers, dear. Don't be the villain in your own son's life." I hung up. I did not explain. They had already cast the rolls, and I was the witch in the woods, holding back the prince from his castle. An hour later, a black luxury SUV pulled up to the edge of my property line. I recognized the driver immediately. It was Gordon Whitaker. He stepped out, accompanied by a woman in a sharp blazer holding a clipboard, a real estate broker. They did not come to the door. They stood by the old split-rail fence, pointing at the meadow, discussing my home as if it were already a vacant lot. I did not hide. I did not cry. I took my phone, opened the camera app, and walked out to the porch. I pressed record. "Mr. Whitaker," I called out, my voice ringing clear across the yard. Gordon looked up, unbothered. He smiled a tight, arrogant smile. "Afternoon?" "Marjorie," he called back, just showing the potential. "No need to get excited." "You are trespassing," I said, walking down the steps, but keeping a safe distance. I kept the camera steady on his face. "This is private property. I have not listed it for sale, and I have not invited you here. Leave. Now. We are just on the easement. Marjorie, he said, waving a hand dismissively. Don't be dramatic. We are just doing some due diligence for the transition. There is no transition, I stated flatly. I am asking you to leave for the second time. The third time. I call the sheriff. Gordon stared at me for a long moment, his eyes cold and calculating. He whispered something to the broker, and they got back into the car. As he drove away, he didn't look defeated. He looked like a man who knew something I didn't. That evening, a courier arrived with a thick envelope from a law firm in Bayhaven. I opened it at the kitchen table. It was a formal demand for a competency evaluation. They were giving me 10 days to submit to a psychological assessment by a doctor of their choosing, citing erratic behavior and suspected cognitive decline. They were not just coming for the land, they were coming for my mind. I drove straight to June's office, even though it was late. June read the letter and tossed it onto her desk with a look of disgust. This is a standard intimidation tactic, June said. But we are ready. I have Dr. Evans's report from yesterday. You scored perfectly on every cognitive metric. I am going to file this counter motion tomorrow morning, along with a formal complaint regarding elder abuse and the fraudulent bank withdrawal. Just then, June's desk phone rang. She frowned, checking the caller ID. It is the land registry office, she whispered to me. I have a contact there. She put it on speaker. June. A woman's voice whispered on the line. It is Linda. Look, I shouldn't be calling, but a request just came across my desk. It was flagged because of the alert you put on the Caldwell property. What is it? Linda June asked. Someone just tried to file a power of attorney document electronically. Linda said. It grants full property rights to an Ethan Caldwell. It has Marjorie's signature on it, notarized by a guy in Bayhaven. I felt the air leave the room. I never signed a power of attorney, I said, my voice barely audible. June looked at me, her face pale. They didn't wait for the competency hearing, June said into the phone. They forged it. They are trying to transfer the deed before we can stop them. I rejected it for a formatting error to buy you time, Linda said. But they will fix it and resubmit by tomorrow morning. June hung up. The silence in the office was heavy, suffocating. They were not just unethical relatives anymore. They were criminals. They were willing to erase my existence with a pen stroke just to cash in on my legacy. I stood up. The fear that had been gnawing at me for days was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. Marjorie, June said gently, we can fight this on ethical grounds. We can... No. I interrupted. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark street. We are done with ethical arguments. We are done waiting for them to have a conscience. I turned back to June. They want a piece of paper, I asked. Fine. I will give them a piece of paper. But it won't be the one they think they are getting. The atmosphere inside the conference room of the law office was not dramatic. There were no shouting matches or slamming doors. There was only the rhythmic, heavy thud of a notary stamp hitting paper. I sat across from June Harkness and an independent notary she had brought in from the next county, a man named Mr. Henderson, who did not know me, did not know my son, and certainly did not know the Whitakers. We were systematically dismantling the future my son thought he had secured. This is the transfer deed into the irrevocable trust, June explained, sliding a document toward me. And this is the freeze order on your personal accounts, flagging any external transfer attempts as fraud. I signed my name. My hand did not shake. The ink dried instantly in the cool air of the office. Earlier that morning, I had met with the director of the Evergreen Hollow Conservancy. It was a small, local organization dedicated to preserving the natural corridors of Millstone Ridge. I had not just offered them the land, I had offered them a partnership. By the time I left their office, we had the framework for a donation agreement that would turn Cedar Hollow into a protected habitat, managed by them, owned by the trust, and forever out of reach of any developer. I kept this silence close to my chest. To the outside world, I was still the confused, wavering mother. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Ethan. I kept it vague, playing into the narrative they had constructed about me. I am looking at the papers. I might consider it. I just need time to read. The response was immediate. The phone buzzed in my hand before I could even set it down. It was followed by a notification that a delivery was on its way. An hour later, a massive bouquet of white lilies arrived at the law office, redirected from my home address. The card read, "Love you, Mum. We just want what is best for you. Don't forget the investors are waiting for Thursday." Thursday, I said to June, tossing the card into the trash can. They are obsessed with Thursday, because that is when their option on the construction loan expires. June noted dryly. I sent one more text to Ethan. Send me the full development plan. If I am going to sign, I want to see what you are building. He sent the PDF file within 2 minutes. He probably thought I was finally breaking, that I wanted to see the pretty renderings of the retirement cottages to soothe my conscience. But I did not look at the pictures. I scrolled straight to the bottom of the document, to the fine print regarding contractors and suppliers. I gasped. "Look at this," I said, turning the screen toward June. There, listed as the primary general contractor for the entire project, was Whitaker Build Co. "It is Sloane's family," I said, the realization settling in my gut like lead. Gordon Whitaker is not just helping Ethan with the permits, he is building the units. He is going to charge the project for the construction. He gets paid millions to build it, regardless of whether the units sell or not. June nodded, her eyes scanning the page. "And Ethan is the one taking out the loan to pay him? If the project fails, your son goes bankrupt, and Gordon walks away with the construction fees. He is not investing in my son." I whispered. "He is harvesting him." June pulled another file from her briefcase. "Then let's make sure he harvests nothing," she said. "I have one more layer. We are going to register Cedar Hollow on the county list of environmentally sensitive areas. There is a documented vernal pool in the backwoods. Once we file this, the county will require a 3-year environmental impact study before anyone can even cut down a single tree. 3 years, I repeated. That kills their project immediately. Dead in the water. June agreed. I took the pen again. I signed the environmental petition. I signed the final trust documents. I signed the affidavit stating that I was acting of my own free will, fully aware of the consequences. June gathered the stack of papers. She placed them into a thick manila envelope and sealed it with tape. "I am going to the courthouse now," she said, checking her watch. "It is 2 o'clock. By 4 o'clock, these will be recorded. By 5 o'clock, Cedar Hollow will legally cease to be your personal property." I sat alone in the office while she left. The silence was absolute. I looked at the rain drying on the window. I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The fear was gone. The guilt was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard satisfaction of the truth. My phone buzzed again on the table. It was Ethan. "Mom, did you sign? Send me a picture of the signature page right now. Sloan needs to send it to the bank." I stared at the screen. I could imagine them sitting in their sleek apartment, holding their breath, waiting for the old woman to capitulate. I typed my reply slowly, savoring every letter. "Mom will call tomorrow morning." Wait. No. My mind was drifting. I corrected myself, typing in English. "I will call tomorrow morning." I turned the phone over and closed my eyes. Let them have one last night of hope. Tomorrow, I would wake them up. The sun began to dip below the ridgeline of the western hills, casting long purple shadows across the grass of Cedar Hollow. The air turned cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine resin. I walked the perimeter of the property one last time, not as a sentry, but as a ghost haunting her own life. I ran my hand along the rough wood of the old barn, feeling the splinters against my palm. I stopped by the row of maple trees. Thomas had planted these saplings when Ethan was 5 years old. I remembered a Christmas Eve, nearly 20 years ago, when Thomas had dragged a ladder out here in the freezing wind just to string lights on the highest branches, so Ethan could see them from his bedroom window. I remembered the night Ethan had pneumonia, his small chest rattling with every breath. I had stayed awake for 36 hours straight, holding a cool cloth to his forehead, terrified that the fever would take him. I thought I had raised a kind man. I thought I had raised a man who understood the value of loyalty. But standing there in the twilight, I realized I had been mourning the loss of a son who perhaps never really existed. My phone vibrated in my pocket, shattering the silence. I pulled it out. It was a text message from Ethan. It was long. A wall of grey text against the white screen. "Mum, please. I am sorry about the wedding. I know we messed up. But you have to understand the pressure I am under. If you don't sign by tomorrow morning, Sloane's father is going to file a motion for guardianship. He says you are being influenced by that lawyer. We will take you to court. Mum. And we will win. Don't make me do this to you." I stared at the words. The apology was there, but it was wrapped in a threat. He was not being manipulated anymore. He was making a choice. He was choosing the path of least resistance, even if it meant running over his own mother to get there. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was not Ethan. It was Darlene, my neighbour. "Marjorie," Darlene whispered, her voice urgent. "There is a car stopped at your front gate, a black SUV. I see 2 men getting out." My heart hammered against my ribs. I turned and walked quickly back to the house, locking the back door behind me. I went to the kitchen and pulled up the security feed on my tablet. There they were, in the grainy black and white footage. I saw the headlights cutting through the dusk. Ethan was standing by the gate, looking toward the house. Behind him, leaning against the hood of the car like a vulture waiting for a meal, was Gordon Whitaker. Ethan cupped his hands around his mouth. Even through the closed windows, I could hear his voice muffled by the distance. "Mom, Mum. Open the gate." He did not sound worried. He sounded angry. He sounded like a man standing in front of a locked safe that refused to open. "Mum, we know you are in there. We just need the papers." He was not here to apologize. He was here to strong-arm me. He was here because he knew the clock was ticking down to his deadline with the investors. I did not go out. I did not turn on the porch light. I stood in the darkness of my kitchen, my hand shaking as I held up my phone to record the screen of the tablet. I zoomed in on Gordon's face, capturing the arrogance, capturing the way he checked his watch, as if my life were wasting his time. "Go home. Ethan," I whispered to the empty room. "There is nothing left here for you." I dialed June's number. She answered on the first ring. "They are here," I said, my voice steady now. "Ethan and Gordon. They are at my gate, screaming for the papers." "Do not open the door," June said, her tone sharp. "Do not engage. The trust documents have been received by the clerk's office, but they won't be officially stamped and recorded until 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. We are in the final stretch. Marjorie, if they get to you tonight, if they force you to sign anything under duress, it complicates everything. I won't open the door," I said. "I am recording them." "Good. Stay inside. Lock everything. I will meet you at the office at 7:30 sharp." I hung up. Outside, the shouting stopped. I watched on the screen as Ethan kicked the fence post in frustration. Gordon said something to him, clapping a hand on his shoulder, and they got back into the car. They were retreating, but only because they thought they could win in court the next day. I walked into the living room and picked up the framed photograph of Thomas from the mantel. He was smiling, his eyes crinkled at the corners, looking at a world that made sense. I touched the glass. "You told me to protect it," I said softly to the picture. "And I am. Tomorrow, our son is going to hear the truth. He is not going to hear it with tears. He is going to hear it with the law." The morning sun streamed through the blinds of June Harkness's office, illuminating the freshly stamped documents on her desk. The ink on the official seal was still wet. It was done. Cedar Hollow was now officially the property of the Evergreen Hollow Conservancy Trust. It was designated as a protected ecological corridor, subject to a 3-year environmental impact study before a single twig could be snapped. It could not be subdivided. It could not be developed. It could not be sold. June looked at me and nodded. The clock on the wall read 8:01 in the morning. I placed my phone in the center of the desk and dialed Ethan. He answered on the first ring, his voice tight with anticipation. He was expecting a surrender. "Do you have the papers?" he asked, breathless. "Did you sign them?" I looked at the deed one last time. I felt a strange, hollow calm, like the air after a thunderstorm. "It is not yours anymore," I said. The silence on the other end was absolute. What Ethan asked, his voice cracking. "What do you mean?" "What did you sign? I signed it all away." "Ethan," I said, my voice steady and cold. "Cedar Hollow now belongs to a land trust. It is a conservation zone. There will be no condos. There will be no 8 units. There will be no payout for Gordon." You can't do that," Ethan screamed, the sound distorting through the speaker. "You have no right." "Mum, tell me you are joking." In the background, I heard Sloane's voice, shrill and panicked. "What is she saying? What is that old woman doing? Give me the phone." June leaned forward, her voice cutting through their panic like a judge's gavel. "This is June Harkness, Mrs. Caldwell's attorney. The trust is irrevocable. We have also filed a certified competency evaluation for Marjorie dated 2 days ago, proving she is of sound mind. Furthermore, we have submitted evidence to the sheriff regarding the trespassing on private property, the fraudulent change of address form, and the unauthorized access of her bank accounts." "Fraud," Sloane screeched in the background. We didn't commit fraud. She is lying. I am looking at the transaction record right now, I said, interrupting her. $9,500, withdrawn from an ATM in Bayhaven using a card I entrusted to my son 10 years ago. That was not a gift. Sloan. That was theft. And unless that money is returned to my account within 24 hours, the police report I filed this morning will be processed as a felony charge. There was a sudden, chaotic noise on the other end. I heard a man's voice. Gordon. He sounded distant, but clear enough. I told you to handle her. Ethan Gordon shouted. I told you this was a done deal. If the land is locked up, the project is dead. I am not eating the cost of the permits. You are on your own. Kid. Gordon, wait. Ethan stammered. Uncle Gordon, we can fix this. Don't call me uncle. Gordon snapped. And lose my number? The deal is off. I heard a door slam. Then silence. Gordon had walked out the moment the money dried up. Ethan Sloan was sobbing now, her voice trembling with terror. Ethan. He left. But we used the $9,500 for the deposit. We don't have it anymore. Ethan, you have to make her fix this. Tell her to undo it. Ethan was breathing hard, short, ragged gasps. He finally understood. He had not been a partner. He had been a tool. He had been the battering ram they used to try and break down my door. And now that the door was reinforced steel, they were discarding him. Mom, Ethan whispered, his voice broken, sounding like the little boy who used to scrape his knees in the barn. Mom, please. They are going to sue me. I don't have the money. Please, just help me one more time. I am your son. I closed my eyes. I felt the tears prick at the corners, but I did not let them fall. I remembered him standing in the parking lot, telling me to leave. I remembered him calling my life's work dirt. I remembered him choosing his wife's greed over my dignity. I am your mother, I said softly, but I am not your victim. Mom, please, he begged. You chose, I said, delivering the final 4 words that severed the cord between us. Live with it. I tapped the red icon on the screen. The call ended. I placed the phone face down on the desk. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the sun was fully up, shining on a world that was different than it had been yesterday. I looked at June. She offered me a small, sad smile. Are you okay? She asked. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean, sterile air of the office. Yes, I said. I think I finally am. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was an emotional roller coaster, wasn't it? I'd love to know where you guys are tuning in from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please hit that subscribe button for Grandma's Family Diary. Smash the like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it. See you in the next video.